And now, live from Mo's windowless room, it's AWS's Howdy Partner. Take it away, Mo.
Thank you, Ghost Host AM. And hello, Twitch. I'm glad to be back for, I think, episode 5, I believe. But with me are two beautiful new faces. First, we have Marie. Marie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hey, I'm Marie. I'm with AWS. I get to work with the lovely Mo and our Ghost Host as well. I'm happy to be on the show and happy to be hanging out with mParticle today.
Nice. And then she alluded to it. We have Kale, Product Marketing Manager at mParticle. Kale, do you want to introduce yourself?
G'day Mo, g'day Marie, Ghost Host Internet. Hi, yes, I'm Kale. I work product marketing at mParticle. I'm happy to be here today.
Nice. We're certainly glad to have you. Today, what are we talking about? I think we're talking about customer data platforms, big data. It's a little bit out of my purview. I think it's out of Marie's purview as well. So we're just going to dive right in. I think, Marie, you want to set the stage for Kale? You want to ask him some questions?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Mo.
Question me.
Questions. Here we go. So first off, obviously we have a variety of different types of guests on this show, but super curious about what you do specifically for mParticle.
Sure thing. And I've watched some of your other episodes, and I've seen you have like real proper developers and engineers and stuff on here. I'm not that. I'm a product marketing manager at mParticle, so that can mean a few things depending on where you're working. I think for us, I usually say it means that it's my job to prove that we can really do what we say we do. So that encompasses stuff like this. It encompasses, writing up a lot of use cases that we encounter, making sure that everybody understands the value that we provide.
Yeah, and so rumor has it too, you have a lot of experience kind of with not only marketing the product, but with the product as well. So tell us a little bit more about kind of the stuff that you get to do on the ground floor.
Sure thing. So yeah, I've been using mParticle for a long time. I've been with the company 3 years. I started as a technical writer, and I moved into the product marketing realm about a year ago. But yeah, in both of those roles, really, I'm working with actually using the product all the time. I'm doing a lot of demos. I'm doing a lot of testing of the product. So I work with our engineers to make sure that that what we're building is what we intended to build, that it covers the use cases that we intended for it to cover. I work with early clients to make sure that they're having success, and then I get out what we're doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for our viewers, and obviously for Mo and I as well, can you explain to us what exactly a customer data platform or data pipeline is? And I'm going to ask you to explain it from like a 101 level. So if you're explaining to like nieces or nephews, and then all the way up to an expert level, just to kind of capture those viewing here today.
Sure. Well, in terms of what we are, I think like in many ways the answer is the same at all levels of understanding. Our job is to get data from wherever it is, unify it into a picture of a user, and then make that data about the user available to any platforms or services that need it. So to go into a little bit more detail there, getting data from wherever it is. So that could be from a mobile app, a web app. It could be from backend systems, from gaming platforms. It could be from offline sources like point of sale in a brick and mortar store, or it could be from third-party sources like a marketing automation platform that sends us information. So it's collecting data, but all of this data is it's not really about a phone or a web browser or a service or a credit card. It's about a person. So our job then, once we receive this data, is we use customizable identity resolution techniques to build profiles of each of your users. And we give our customers a lot of control over how that's done. And then we push that data out to wherever it's needed. So that can be, marketing automation platforms to do your email, to do your push. It can be out to DSPs. It can be out to walled gardens to do advertising. It can be out to analytics services. It can be, I'm sure I'm forgetting others, A/B testing, attribution, location services platforms. And then, of course, finally, we also make it available anywhere that you can make an API call via a profile API. So you're collecting all that data and using it to learn things about your users, to make inferences, and then acting on that inference no matter where the user is. So the idea is that, if you have a user who is, say, at risk of churning, and that user reaches out to you, by showing up in the store for the first time in a while, by visiting your website, by hitting up a phone support line, whatever. No matter what the channel is that you're interacting through, you're using that same fundamental set of information to make decisions and create an experience.
Yeah, so it sounds like you guys kind of do everything. You guys touch a lot of different businesses. You're capturing a lot of data. What are some of the assumptions that you think businesses make about their own data pipelines before they come to you guys for help?
I think there are a few assumptions that people commonly make. And obviously this is from my point of view as somebody who thinks that CDP is a pretty good thing to use, particularly us. I think a common assumption is that, I'd say the most common is that it's easy to build yourself. Most businesses will think of they'll think of the 4 or 5 use cases they want to cover today. And they'll tend to think of wherever they started. They'll think in terms of, I have this website, I have this mobile app, right? And I need to see if I'm having retention on the mobile app or something like that. So they'll say, okay, I can pipe data from the mobile app to an analytics platform and I can solve my problem. Or I can run a SQL query to see who my high value customers are, and I can upload that data to Facebook and make a lookalike audience for targeting, right? But I think that the issues that come up, one is that as your business grows, you're going to add more users, more platforms, you're going to use more services, and the kind of spaghetti that you come up with connecting, it's a lot to maintain. And the people that have to build that infrastructure tend to be like very senior people in your company that deeply know your data structure. So it's not only that you have to build it yourself, then you've got to maintain it yourself. You lose time, and the particular resources that you use tend to be exactly the ones that you want doing other stuff. And so it's definitely something that we find. And I think the other thing about that is that we've seen recently, just as one example, new privacy laws coming out of Europe in the GDPR, in California with the CCPA.
Yeah.
And I think now what we're learning is you can build it yourself, but you don't have to just build it one time. When something as big as the GDPR comes out, you have to build it all over again.
Yeah.
Making sure that you're taking into account those new obligations, because I think people are starting to understand data is an asset, but it's a liability as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I was going to say the same thing. Yeah. Absolutely. Same thing with code. It's as if like people are always itching to like write code and solve, build things from scratch. Essentially, code can be an asset, right? But maintaining that code and playing around with it just as much as it's a liability as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think I say to people that and there are definitely people that want that control. And I'll definitely say, and one of the things that I'll show you today is that, you can use a service like mParticle and still build it yourself. And in fact, like most of our biggest clients, they'll use some of our productized integrations where we'll pipe data out to some place or another. But often their biggest use case for us is having us as a data clearinghouse and pumping us out to a Kinesis stream or a Kafka stream or something where they're going to do something totally custom with the data. But before it gets to them, it's been standardized, cleaned, and organized around people by us. So I would say the biggest assumption is that this is something that with a little bit of time and effort, we can replicate. And truth be told, the answer is for any individual use case, you absolutely can. But it's, the question and the value comes as you stack feeds and sources and use cases up, and you're left with something that you're trying to manage on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like, well, I'm looking forward to seeing the demo here again and how you guys can make that easier. So just a little bit of backstory on mParticle. How did your team or the founders kind of come up with this idea? Obviously, it sounds like there was a ton of use cases behind it, but were they just sitting in a room and just like, we're going to put this together and this is how the platform came to be? Or was there a few iterations before that?
I can tell you some of the circumstances. I wasn't in the room, and I don't know all the details, but our three founders actually had a previous company called Interclick, and Interclick was, I guess, a kind of DSP a service around like selling advertising, and being involved in that space, I think made them really appreciate the challenge of, when you want to do that, you need to track, how well something is working. And when you have a customer that could buy, they could buy in store, they could buy from the app, they could buy on the website, that challenge of like, how do you really know that your advertising is working? And now for mParticle, like that's just one use case that we cover of many. But I think for our founders, like the awareness of how big the problem of customer data is, and like how much work there is to be done in the space is really where the company comes from.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And just hearing you talk about kind of all the facets of all industries that you're able to reach with the platform, who should be using mParticle and when should they start using it? At what point is that valuable to them, in your opinion?
I think there's always a tension here because I think everybody should start using us straight away. I think any company that needs to have a sustained relationship with the customer, especially one across multiple platforms, is somebody who should use us. And you'll see like our client list is full of like gaming, it's full of like multi-channel retail, it's full of travel, it's full of streaming media. So these are people who, again, they've got an ongoing relationship with their users and they need to meet their users wherever they are. So anybody that's facing that challenge really needs to be using a CDP. I'd say the other piece is, as you grow, that it just gets more important. In a lot of ways, the earlier you start using a CDP, the easier it is because we can really help you organize your data collection and start in a clean way. But usually the people that come to us not always, often the people that come to us and seek us out are the people who have not been using a CDP for a while and have felt the pain of trying to do it themselves. Yeah. Have sort of tried to bring together, data from 5 different sources, and they see that, everything's named a little bit different. You have to know each of these 5 data structures intimately. And, every time you want to run a new query, you have to remember all the different little intricacies of the thing, so I think like the people that come to us are often the people that have been struggling with this for a while anyway. But I definitely think like if your business is thinking along those lines, the sooner you start, the easier your life is going to be and the quicker you'll be able to scale. I'd also say anybody that doesn't have like infinite engineering resources too is the people that should be trying with us. I think like a big thing that we do, and again I'll kind of show you some of this. I like to think we take like more complicated use cases and turn them into something that you can just try out, right? Instead of something that would be like a huge amount of effort to set up. And I don't know about you guys, but I find in my own work, if I can do something myself, that thing gets done. If I've got to like Slack 5 different people and kind of ask them for a favor for the things that I need to do that task, like it would take me longer, but I realistically kind of probably I won't do it. Like I'll be busy doing other things. So definitely. Like I think like we really help like from a developer perspective, I think like we really empower them to do a lot more. But we also kind of free up both marketing teams and development teams to kind of do a little bit more for themselves. And to like have access to data and to have power to just like start up a use case. To just try something out. So I think like the things that I like most tend to be stuff that I think, if this person wasn't using mParticle, they probably just never would have done this because it would have been scratched off as too hard.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you totally capture the conundrum I think we all face in everyday life as leaving it to the experts, right? If there's something that already exists that can kind of make life easier. I know I've been in plenty of situations where it's like, we're going to try and cut down this tree in our backyard, but really we should be hiring the experts to kind of do that quickly and safely. So
absolutely.
That's definitely a great point. So this is my last question before we can jump into the demo, and obviously the most important one. And I know you being from Australia, this might not translate all the way, but hopefully I can hopefully get a good answer from you here. So if mParticle was a cereal, what type of cereal would it be?
I struggle with, there's definitely like a culture thing here. I struggle with this question. I feel like mParticle wouldn't be any type of breakfast cereal because mParticle is for grown-ups.
Are you saying grown-ups don't eat cereal?
Not where I come from. But I guess we would be, what's the cereal with the tiger? Because we're great. Frosted Flakes has the tiger, right?
Frosted
There we
Flakes.
go. That's the cereal we would be.
That's awesome. Great cereal. Crunchy, sweet, good mascot. Yeah, I like it. I will say to everyone on Twitch that it is appropriate to eat cereal as an adult, despite what Kale has communicated.
Disagree.
No one will judge you. Awesome.
And not for breakfast. Yeah. It's not just a breakfast food, of course, but yeah.
Yeah. Anytime. Awesome. So for those of you that are just joining, today we're talking customer data pipelines with mParticle. Our friend Kale here was just about to dive into some demos, teaching us all about how mParticle can do some of the undifferentiated heavy lifting with respect to collecting and cleansing and unifying data. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Kale, if you can share your screen and get into your demo for us.
Sure thing. 1 second. Let me just share.
Marie,
Okay.
I love the undifferentiated heavy lifting line. Sounds a lot like what we do at AWS, huh?
Yeah.
Leave it to the experts.
There's definitely a lot of heavy lifting done on both sides here, and we'll get to it. So anytime I show somebody mParticle, I usually start here. I'm just going to take you on a really quick tour of some of the things that we'll do, and then I'm going to jump into a more practical use case that involves AWS and machine learning. So I always start here, and this is just our way of looking at a user profile. So as a customer data platform, this is kind of what it's all about. We're trying to get data from everywhere and make it all available in this one place. So here's a user profile, and it's all centered around this mParticle ID, which is the universal ID that we assign to somebody. And having that ID is really useful because it can kind of grow with the user. As soon as somebody hits, say, a website, we have a cookie ID for them. We'll assign them an mParticle ID. And as we add, as they sign up for a service, maybe we have an email, we have a customer ID. But depending on how you set things up, you can keep that same mParticle ID and then add streams from different channels as you go along, because you'll still have something like an email that can tie things together. And for something like a machine learning use case that I'll show you, it's really great because I can use this mParticle ID as my user ID for the ML algorithm. And it means I capture those like really important first few views that tend to happen like in an anonymous state when somebody first visits something like an e-com property before they sign up, before they make a purchase, and before you have these permanent IDs. So on the profile, I can see all the workspaces I've seen this user on. A workspace is just a collection of data. It usually corresponds to like an app property. Where have I seen the user? I've seen them on Android, on iOS, on web. I've seen data come through from these different partner feeds. I've got attribution information coming through. I'm sending in data from my customer backend. I have a list of devices here that I've seen them on too. These are also IDs that we can use for the customer. Much more importantly, I have this set of user attributes that I've collected from all over. This address and age stuff might come from a sign-up form. Other stuff like this ML churn risk here might be a score that's calculated by, say, a SageMaker or something like that on the Amazon platform. I can see these little ones next to a calculator are calculated attributes that we actually keep up to date in real time depending on purchases. So this purchases this month is going to count up every time somebody makes a purchase. So if I send in a new purchase on this user, this attribute's automatically going to increment. And that's really pretty much it here. These others, I have original install attribution for the app. And I also have here, this is important, membership of every audience. And we have what we call an audience builder, which basically creates segments of users. And I can always see on every user profile all of the segments that user is part of. Finally, down the bottom, I can see consent and compliance information. So that has to do with the GDPR and CCPA. So the GDPR requires you. This is the fun stuff, but actually, it's pretty good. I actually love having this stuff because I think as we move forward, you sort of see the feel of the market moving away from like creepy third-party data. Mm-hmm. You actually get better business outcomes when the consumer feels respected, they don't feel creeped out, and when they understand like why you have the data you have and how you've collected it and how you're using it. So basically what mParticle allows you to do is basically collect true or false consent against any variety of purposes that you care to define. And those purposes can then be used as switches to control data flow to different places. So if I've said I don't want my data to be used for marketing, I can actually use that as a hook to exclude this user from any audiences that I might be doing for email marketing or something like that. So this is just a set of switches that we can use to decide what we do with the data for this user. So this is basically what the profile is. The other half of it is event data that we receive in real time and that we forward to wherever it needs to go. So how do we actually get this and make it work? It's really important the more platforms you add that you're thinking about quality and you're thinking about consistency. Because if I want to have, say, I want to view, I'm thinking about what products did a person buy. If I want to bring all the data together from in-store, from the web app, from the mobile app, I need to be naming things the same in every place. I need to be doing really consistently having everything keyed the same. And also for my values to fit the same kind of filters. And it's something that sounds obvious, but it's the easiest thing in the world to get wrong. And you'll find back in the day, this would be done by somebody writing up a spreadsheet of the things they wanted, sending it out to 5 different development teams, and each development team would get it about 80% right. And then you bring in those 5 together, and you'll actually find there's almost nothing where all your 5 data sets really marry up. So we have a bunch of tools to help people manage data quality. The first one here is this catalog. This is basically just a view of every data point that I've ever received through this workspace. And I can also look at each one and see, what attributes have I collected with it. And something that's really important is where have I sent it? I don't actually have anything for this one because this is just a test, but I could see every input I'd collected it from and every output that I'd sent it to. That can be really important if you accidentally collect something you didn't want to collect. You can instantly go and see how big the problem is and where you need to go take care of it, because you have this inventory that's always there and always up to date. So that's one thing. It's good to see what you've done. But plans are a way for you to state what you want to do and check that you're actually really doing what you want to do. So you can see here, this is a simple plan that defines what kinds of events that I want to collect. And not only can I define the string that I want my event name to be, but I can also say what type of attributes I can select. So say that I've got this attribute here, coupon type, for a coupon used event. I can say, for one thing, well, I expect this to be a string or a number or something like that. But I can also add validation. So I can say, we provide these sort of built-in ones. If it needs to be an IP4 or an email or stuff, these are basically regexes that you can choose. But I can also say if I've got a coupon type, I can say it should be gold or silver. And if this event comes in and the coupon type doesn't match one of these, I'll get a violation to say something's wrong here.
It's 5 hours of dev work in 2 clicks.
All done. So I can go and I can see the unique violations here, but I can actually take it a step further. We just released a product called Smart Type that can actually take your plans and turn them into a type-safe library so that every event that you want to track just becomes a method on that library. So it's actually impossible to log a wrong thing. Because I definitely find, like, we've traditionally tried to attack these problems of data quality with like human discipline, which is great, but those solutions are really unfun, and inevitably you will make some mistakes. I think like we definitely are sort of wanting to we'll go for work smarter, not harder, and just make it a lot easier for developers to comply with a plan. So that's definitely something you can do, but if you don't want to go that whole way, you can collect data, as we normally do through free strings. But you'll always be able to see here if you're collecting something that isn't as planned. You can see where it's come from. You can go back to the source. You can fix it. So that's really very important to be for the collection of data. Now, once you've collected it, we want to send it somewhere. These here are all of my inputs. So you'll see some of these are like something like iOS, Android. These are my native apps. But I have others which are like productized feeds. So for example, Radar will send us location information. And they can also send us like geofences. You can define geofences around your stores. Radar will send us an event to say when a user's entered a geofence. A similar thing from Foursquare. Marketing automation platforms like Braze will send us details about how a user interacts with email or a push message. So email opened, link clicked, all that stuff. And these are things that come from just custom events that we've set up. Like, for example, this one is events from a point of sale system. So I can take any of these like iOS and I can start to feed them out to external systems. So in the old days, I might have installed the Amplitude SDK in my mobile app, or I might have used the Amplitude API. But again, if I'm sending out this same sort of data to 5-6 different sources, just keeping that up to date is a lot of work. And you're like sort of working over the same ground multiple times. So all I really need to do is set up Amplitude here as my output. And you'll see here that all I really need is that key to get it going. And I can choose other stuff like, how I want my data to be sent, all in settings. This is the kind of thing that you used to put in code in your front end. And we just sort of allow it to be set in the UI. So this now becomes something that a marketer can just set up and be sending. And we actually have, just like this one with Amplitude, we have set up a lot of different productized integrations with AWS. And I'm going to show you some of those.
Yeah, and we have a couple.
I was going to ask.
Oh, go for it. I was going to say we have a couple questions in the chat, but you got this now.
No, well, I think the chat question. Oh, does it also? Not yet. I don't think. Does it support EventBridge? I don't think it supports EventBridge.
No, we're actually we're working on one for EventBridge. I'm going to show you. The one I'm particularly going to use today is Kinesis. But yeah, we do have others, and EventBridge is on the list. That's a good question.
The other question for you is, how many input options does mParticle support? So you kind of showed us a lot of things there, but how many can you do an infinite amount, or how many can we go up to?
Yeah. So I'll show you this. And so basically these inputs are the ones that we've kind of prepared in advance. You see there's a lot here, including Fire TV and Alexa. But for some like iOS and Android and web, we have some extra juice built in. So if you use, for example, our iOS SDK to collect data, our SDK is automatically going to go and get stuff like screen size, battery percentage, all that good device state stuff is going to be collected automatically for you. So that stuff is specific to the iOS platform. Some other stuff is specific to Android or specific to web. But these others, I can also create basically what we call a custom feed. And that's just going to, I'm not going to click on it because it would show you the keys. But all that's going to do is give me a key and secret that I can use to call my mParticle API. And so then I can send data from anywhere I can make an HTTP call. So that's where stuff like point of sale comes in. Anything that uses, any kind of in-store kiosk or something, we might not have a productized SDK for that, but you can just use our API to send us event data. And as for the feeds, we also have like a limited set of productized feeds. but we're always adding more. And you can see those. There's a directory on our website if you want to see exactly what integrations that we currently have. I will show you also quickly, just so you get the idea. I think this is something that most of our viewers will have probably seen in one place or another. It's a segment builder. What really makes ours special is that we tend to have access to more data than anybody else. A lot of our downstream partners also have segmentation providers too. But just like sending event data, I can create this segment here like a suppression segment, and I can connect it up to any number of audience outputs. I can send this to Facebook, I can send it to Salesforce, I can send it to Braze. And what's really great here is that I can build in a completion condition or an exclusion condition from my audiences. Let's say for retargeting, I want to retarget somebody who's had X number of product views in the last week but hasn't made a purchase yet.
Retargeting.
So somebody,
So just for the folks who don't know what retargeting is, can we get a definition? I'm assuming
retargeting
it's
is the devil's form of advertising, where you've looked at a product on an e-commerce website, and now that they know that you want it, they're going to show it to you over and over again until you crack. Or just like basically, instead of just targeting people at random, you're taking existing users that you have already know at least have displayed some kind of interest in what it is you do, and you're focusing on targeting them because your ad spend is valuable. I think that's really what it comes down to. So if I define an audience like that, I can also say, exclude anybody who's made a purchase because I've got them. I got them already. So and when somebody does make a purchase, you drop them out of not just one audience, you drop them out of Facebook, you drop them out of your DMP, you drop them out of your keyword search advertising. So without doing a lot of heavy lifting, you can really cut a lot of waste in one go by organizing audiences through here.
That's really awesome. I can't tell you how many times I've looked at something on Instagram, for example, and then gotten emails about it, then eventually bought it and still got emails to purchase it.
Still get the emails, right?
Super annoying.
They should be They should be using mParticle because and you're right. It's not just about money. It also creates a bad customer experience. So that's actually it's a really good point. Okay, so now I'm going to kind of step into the specific use case that I wanted to show you, and it is about machine learning. So I'm going to use this is the graph that that our designers have come up with, and that's why it looks nice. I'm going to show you a more detailed and much uglier picture in a moment. But actually, can you see my pointer?
Yes.
Is that part of what's shared? Okay, so this is really to solve this following use case. So I have an e-commerce store. In fact, why don't I show it to you? My store is items for you, the finest items which you will particularly enjoy. And this obviously isn't the whole store. I've just put the carousel in the front. But because, my store, we sell a lot of items, right? And a lot of different kind of items. You can buy a jellyfish, you can buy this lion, some strawberries, you can buy some gnarled old hands. I just hooked this up to a stock photo generator. So, but for this to be good, I really want to be providing my users a more personalized experience. I want to show them items which they will particularly enjoy. So I need to be providing some personalization here. And I want to kind of build in exactly the kind of machine learning that Amazon uses to give people recs based on what they've already viewed. So that's kind of what I'm going for here. And this is kind of how we achieve it in a general sense. So here we have the app. It's a little picture of a telephone, could just as easily be a web browser. The app is sending event and user data out to mParticle via our events API. mParticle streams all that raw data out to some machine learning or data science platform. And from the machine learning or data science platform, we send those user insights back to mParticle. And then we deliver those through our profile API to some personalization service that's built into your backend. And the personalization service delivers that information to the app in the form of, for this use case, product recommendations. So this is the use case that we're actually going to set up and see how it works. So here is my uglier and more detailed drawing of what we're actually going to do. You can see in black here is the event data, and in blue here are the product recs. So again, we start from the app. And what we're going to send out is e-commerce events. So anything that has to do with a product. So particularly someone adds to a cart, adds to a wish list, a product, if they purchase the product, or if they view the detail of the product. Those are the four particular events. And what's great in the mParticle sense is that any mParticle customer is collecting this data anyway. It's not something you have to go out and get. You've been doing it because you need that to power all your analytics, your attribution, the other things that you do. So what we're going to do is mParticle is going to send this data out to an Amazon Kinesis stream that I've set up. And an event arriving in the Kinesis stream is going to trigger a Lambda function that processes the event. The Lambda function is going to use put events on the AWS SDK to feed the event records into AWS Personalize. And once it's done that, it's also going to call get recommendations to get the current recommended products for that user. Once we have the recommended products, we're going to call the mParticle API, get those recs stored back on the profile. And then in my front end here, when I want to get recommendations, I'm going to ask this personalization service that I built. Personalization service is going to call the profile API, get the recs back, deliver them to the front end. So that's a bit of a journey. But as you'll see, it all happens pretty quickly. So let us start with, I'm going to slightly change the size of this so I can hit the tab. Let's start with Amazon Personalize itself. So what basically we have here in Amazon Personalize is you are basically collecting, so this service basically is a really hyper-focused kind of machine learning platform that just delivers these recipes that are around products. So you don't need to know a lot, right? You don't need to be a machine learning expert. You don't need to be a Python guru, right? I think that's what I need to. AWS is taking care of all this for you. Yeah.
It's good to hear. It's good to hear you say that. I've never played around with Personalize myself, but obviously all of the language around it is this is supposed to be what we call like an AI service or an API service. But you don't have to be a machine learning expert to actually use Personalize. So it's glad to hear that based on your experience, that's true. But yeah.
So I'll say that like in terms of the work that mParticle and AWS do separately, so I think what AWS has done is take out all the machine learning knowledge that you need to get a use case like this up and running. But there's still kind of three problems that you have left to solve. One is getting data into the algorithm, right? So you need to provide training data, and of course, then you need to actually update your user records in real time so that those recommendations can keep changing. So that just by itself can be a pretty heavy lift if you're starting from scratch. Yeah. You've got to find somewhere you've stored all your data. You've got to write special queries. And you can do a SQL query as a one-off job, but you're going to go back and do it weekly. That's not fast enough, right? So you can either use the Amazon SDK, or as our customers are collecting all this data anyway. So we're just going to hook it up and send it. Problem two is that once you've got the recommendations, how do you make them actionable and how do you use them in an intelligent way? And the third problem is how do you measure whether what you're doing is actually successful or not? How can you tell, if what you're doing is working? So those are the three things that I kind of want to cover from the mParticle end as we go through here. So a data set is the first thing you create. And a data set has a schema, and I'll show you my schema. Basically, these are what a record that I send looks like. I have a user ID, that's going to be my mParticle ID. I have a session ID. I've cheated this. I'm not using the concept of sessions. I'm just taking a unique session ID for every set of messages I send. I could make it smarter by bringing in a session ID. And if I was using the mParticle SDK, I would have a session ID to call on. I just haven't set up that much for this demo. Item ID, this is the SKU of the product. Event type, that's one of four for me. That's add to cart, add to wish list, purchase, view detail. And timestamp, when did it happen? That's the whole schema. That's part of the beauty of this. You really don't need a lot to get started, just these 5 things. So now that I've done that, I need to set up an event tracker, which is what helps me get my event data in. So the event tracker is even simpler. All I really need here is this tracking ID. And for there, I can either use the Amazon JS SDK, but what I'm actually going to use here is the server API. So now let's get my stuff in. I'll show you what a product purchase looks like in mParticle. And again, this might often come from the front end, but because I haven't built a whole front end just for this, I'm going to fake it with Postman just to kind of show you what data looks like going in. All I need to send data to mParticle is some kind of identity. I've used an email here. I can send attributes of a user. and I can send a group of events. In this case, I'm sending a purchase. I can what the total amount is, what the ID of the product is, what the price of it is, the event type. This is a really stripped down version of what we send, and I will send it now, and I'll show you what it looks like in mParticle. I'm gonna have to switch organizations from this one that's full of fake stuff back to the one that has my real stuff. And I'll show you something I didn't show you before, which is the live stream. And this is what lets me look at all of the development data that's coming in real time. So you can see that I've sent here, I'm going to move this out of the way. I've sent this batch of events from iOS. There's only one event in it. And it looks like this. So here's the stuff. And you can also see a lot of zeroed out things here that show you what I haven't sent that I could have sent if I wanted to, particularly if you go down here, like, this is all this device stuff that the SDK would collect by itself if I was using it. There's a lot of stuff here you can see, but for this use case, I don't really need it. And you can also see actually here coming back, here are my product recommendations from AWS. So I'll show you how this comes to be the case. But in response to me logging this purchase event, I've got an update to my Amazon Recs. So I'll go to my connection stream, and I've set up iOS to go out to Amazon Kinesis. I should also show you that when I first set up the Kinesis stream, all I have to do is provide the access key and the secret access key to an IAM user that I've created that has access to write to my Kinesis stream. I won't do that because it's boring and it's all in the docs. But all you have to do is you just have to use IAM to create a dedicated user. And that's one of the good things here, like with Amazon. The security is all kind of built in. You can really lock down what each integration is allowed to do. And now I'm connecting it up to my stream like this. And all I have to do is tell it what the stream name is and what region it's in. And I have some other options here I can choose. For example, I've turned off pretty much everything except commerce events because that's all I want to send. And I can actually filter that in more detail if I want to. So here we are. This is stuff is going from Amazon to my Kinesis stream. I'll show you the Kinesis stream. It just sits here. Here's the ARN of the Kinesis stream, and that's what I use to set everything up. Now, when things hit Kinesis, I go trigger my Lambda event. So here is Lambda. Sorry, I'm switching around between services pretty quickly. And as you can see here, I've set up this Kinesis, and you can just do this within the UI. I set up this Kinesis stream to trigger this personalized event Lambda that I've created. So let's go and have a look at what is in here, because it's really quite simple. I've written mine in Node, kind of just to show you that I could. Like, everybody does these machine learning stuff in Python, but you don't need to know it. I don't know it, at least beyond like the very basics. So I've just written this in Node, and I use the AWS SDK, which is built into this environment, to get everything that I need. So I start up top here by bringing in the stuff that I need. The AWS SDK is one. I use this library JSON-big because mParticle IDs are 64-bit integers, which works really great everywhere except JavaScript. So I'm just using this special library here to pass my incoming message to make sure that I don't round off my unique ID, which would make them not very useful.
Not unique. Yeah.
I also, not unique. So I have but they also wouldn't match what I'm already storing in mParticle, so they wouldn't work as IDs. Here is the mParticle Node SDK, which I'm going to use to construct the messages I send back to mParticle. This is the tracking ID of my machine learning event tracker. And this is my set of reporting actions. Now, I've set up my filtering, so I should only be sending this data, but I've put this in here as an extra check, just to make sure that I'm only processing the data that I want. I'm also initializing here two separate parts of the AWS library: personalized events, which is what puts the events in the solution, and personalized runtime, which is what gets back my recommendations. I'm also starting up my events API with my mParticle key and secret that I've set up before. So now what we're doing is handling our records one by one. And so remember the record that we send with a few extra fields, but it's basically going to look like this. So all we need to do is grab out those 5 fields that we need. So 3 of them are going to apply to all of the products in the message. That's session ID, mParticle ID for the user ID, and that tracking ID, which we've coded at the top. Then we've got this event list. Use personalize, I'm going to skip over for now. I'll come back to that. And then for each commerce event that we have in this batch, because mParticle batches up events so you can send a lot of events for one user at a time. So I've just got to iterate through my events. This example only has one, but there could be more. I grab the timestamp. I've got to divide it by 1,000 because you want seconds and mParticle collects in milliseconds, so easy fix. I grab out that product action, which is the type of event that I'm looking at. I grab out the SKU, which in mParticle terms is the product ID, and in AWS terms is the item ID. And for each one, I push these all to an event list. Now I see, do I actually have any events? It's possible that I might not. So as long as I've got more than one, I'm going to create a set of params and send that to my personalized events SDK I've set up. It'll include, that includes everything that I've already got. So that's great. The machine learning algorithm now has that event that I've just sent in. There's a second piece that I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it as part of the callback if my send has worked. This is where I'm going to grab the other part of personalize, which is getting the recommendations. So I'm going to use the same MPID that I already have access to. I'm going to ask Amazon for recommendations under this campaign. Campaign's just a particular iteration of this machine learning recipe. And I'm going to say, give me some recommendations. If I get the recommendations back, these next few lines are just me constructing a batch of mParticle data and uploading it to mParticle. And that's it. It's a little bit when you're talking through code by code, but really this is like, even with a bit of defensive coding thrown in, there's like not even 100 lines here. So it's very easy to do. And then you'll see that the result of this, if I go back to my data master, is I have this event where I've been sent. Let's see if I can find it. Here we are. Here are my product recs. So these are the IDs of the 5 products that Amazon thinks that this user might want to see. And if I send in a few more, let's see. In fact, let's have a look at this now because I've just switched it. Switch back to the default user for a minute, and we'll look at this guy. You can see the recs have already changed for him. Now he's got the opportunity to buy this lovely bird, this bowl of raspberries instead of strawberry, this rather charming little tea press, the Eiffel Tower, a typewriter, already stuff he would much prefer. But as you'll see, for this same user, if I just, let's see, what are a few? I've only got 30 products here, so I might have already kind of flooded it with too much information to change things really quickly. But I'm just going to send in a few randos. And every time I do this, we're going to update those. We're going to update those products again. So then let's go back here to the live stream, and you can see these coming in. So what did we have here before? We had 24, 13, 15, 25, and 12. Oh, that's the current one. Oh, no. And now we have 27, 21, 18, 13, and 2. So we can see that it's updated. Sometimes takes a few seconds to switch over, but let's see. Nope, we've got some new ones here. Now there's a lovely mud, lovely beach hut, a canoe. Who doesn't love a canoe? So you can see here that, like, anyway, this is just a really simple way of showing that, like, as we're collecting more data in real time, AWS Personalize is having a rethink about what we might want to show this user and what might work the best. It's based on the totality of data that you've collected. So not just for this user, but the more data I collect as I go on, the better these recommendations are going to be. So yeah, I've shown you, so continue. Any questions for this far?
I was just going to say, I feel like this is a really great demo in the sense of how our society is. We're wanting kind of what we want now. And so the fact that this setup can just move so quickly. So as my mind changes, like, oh, I really love coffee, but today, like an hour later, I really want tea. And that kind of can move quickly to market different images or products to me as a customer as we kind of move and shape. So no, that was great.
Absolutely. This is certainly like, and the scope here for demo purposes is limited. I only have 30 products in here total. and I've had maybe, from me working this, maybe there's 2,000 records total in the machine learning system. So you would definitely, this would get more, the more products you added and the more time you took to train it, the better this would get. And actually, that's kind of what I want to show you more. So one thing I've sort of shown is how do you get the data in, right? So that's kind of been shown to be pretty easy. But then there's those other two things that I mentioned, right? So one is like, now that we've done this, how do we apply it in a clever way and in a customized way and in the right channels? So the place that I'm actually putting these recommendations is on this user profile that I've shown you before. So you can see down here, it's actually, here are my product recs, and here they are. So I'm actually, the way I'm returning them to my front end is by calling a personalized, let me see what I've got here, 3+ rec updates, yep. I've written myself a little service to mimic what might be part of your backend. And what my front end is asking is it's giving my service my mParticle ID and asking me what the product recs are. The reason I don't do this straight from the front end is because you see the profile API can deliver tons of personal information about a user, so we never want to expose that in the front end. You always do this in your app backend, and so your front end will ask the backend questions about behavior and get back answers about behavior. You don't want to be piping personal information to your front end. That's a bad idea for security. And essentially, I'm just grabbing here the user attributes on the profile, and I've been sending back directly the list of product recommendations. But in terms of changing up how I apply it, one thing I've found here is that the recommendations they update quickly, but not instantly. So in fact, the recommendations I get back each time, they're one out from one action out from what we've just gotten. So they'll always be one view old, which is not really a problem because views stack up very quickly. But it's certainly true that I'm going to get better recommendations out of 3, 4, 5 different events than I would get from the first one, because the first one's always going to send me back some default. So I can choose to say, if I want to just apply this a little bit smarter, I've also created an audience in mParticle, and my audience says, just identify all the users that have had more than 3 recommendation updates. So basically this is saying, I only want to get updates for people if I've been through the iteration a few times already. So I have some level of confidence. Yep.
So actually, Kale, we have a question in the chat.
Question.
Dub J4 asks, can I use those recommendations in my other MarTech tools?
Yes, you absolutely can. So that's just kind of the beauty of it as well. So you can, because this is just on the profile, there are point solutions that you can buy that do something similar to this. So for example, you can buy a point solution that crawls your website, tracks product views, and sends just remarketing emails with recommended products, right? That's a service you can go and buy. That's plug and play. But if you want to use this rec somewhere that isn't an email, it's a much harder lift. So I think when you use a customer data platform and Amazon Personalize, you can get it set up just as easily as you can set up a point solution. But also you now have these and you can use them wherever you want. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways. But yeah, certainly one is if you're doing transactional email and you want to put a little header down the bottom, or a header down the bottom, what am I talking about? You want to put a footer underneath your message to say, oh, did you think about checking out these? Quick call out to the profile API is going to get them for you. So yeah, that's definitely true. You're not stuck using them in only one place or wherever a point solution wants you to use them. You can use them anywhere. And that includes also in your analytics. So I'm going to show you that in a moment. But yeah, just as another example to how you can make it customizable, using this 3+ audience, if I uncomment this bit of code here, instead of just checking whether I have recommendations, I'm now checking, do I have the recommendations? And also, do I have, is this user part of the audience where there's been at least 3 updates? And if they aren't, I'm going to return some default set of products that I've decided on in advance that I've worked out as a good mix, right? So basically, my machine learning is only kicking in if it's hit some threshold that I've decided I've set is right for me. So that's one way you can kind of just customize how you're delivering machine learned recommendations. Obviously, you could do it almost any other way. And let's say, here I've just returned a default. But if you really wanted to get smart with this, you could say, all right, if I haven't got at least 3 interactions yet, maybe I've got purchase third party from this data I can base recommendations off, or maybe I know something else from a sign-up form or something like that. So you can really sort of, when the goal is just to provide a set of products, you don't have to choose just one way. You can make those decisions here in your personalization service to pull in the best data that you have for the use case. So you can actually combine more than one way of doing this. So the last thing I wanted to show you is this third problem is like, how do you know if the machine learning is working or not? Mm-hmm. And so I want to show you just a way to run a really simple A/B test here. And what
A/B test. For those who don't know, A/B test is
trying 2 strategies against each other and seeing which is the most successful. So then I've created this user attribute, and I'm just going to use mParticle again to collect this attribute that I've called use personalize. And whenever somebody hits the website for the first time, I'm going to shove random, true or false, or I could do it, in whatever preferred way. I could also use a tool like Optimizely to set my audiences for me. If you want to do it in a more disciplined way, I'm just doing it in the simplest possible way I can think of, which is to set this user attribute. So now I'm only returning the product recommendations as well if I'm part of my segment, which is use personalized. If I'm not, they're getting the defaults. So now, because mParticle actually enriches every event that we collect with all the data that's known about my user, I can go back to the live stream, and you can see as part of this batch here, you can see that my user attribute has use personalized is true. So whenever I forward downstream to, say, an analytics service, these commerce events, the fact that we're using personalized for this user is always attached to that data. So I can just go down to a service like Amplitude that I've got set up. And again, I'm not really a whiz at Amplitude, so this is just the most basic thing I could come up with. But I'm looking at the totals for my purchases for people who have this blue graph is people that have the machine learning recommendations, the total amount of purchases. Rather the total price. I could also do total number of products or split it out a different way. And here are the people who haven't. It's more haven't because this is the last thing that I set up to demo. So most people don't have this. Most of my fake users don't have this attribute set. But I could go in here quickly and I could compare, are the people that I'm doing the machine learning recs for actually purchasing more things than the people that I'm not? And you could do any other, like, are they doing more page views? Are they staying longer? There are any number of attributes that you could be seeking out or inferences. And to all of these, you can tie that attribute of whether or not they're getting the machine learned recs. So again, without really doing a lot of extra work, I've been sending all this stuff to Amplitude anyway. I now can very easily dig in and work out exactly how I want to attribute success to my machine learning campaign. So those are sort of those 3 big challenges that sort of come with this space that for our customers become pretty easy because really all of this data is being collected for other use cases already. And it's very easy to just add a new service, add it out to somewhere like personalized. We have our events API that can accept data from anywhere, including, as the example we covered today, this Lambda. I can just pipe back whatever data I want from the profile. Once it's on the profile, I can make it available directly in the app via the profile API. It gets sent downstream to everywhere that I'm sending event data, so I can use it for comparison and further segmentation. I can also use it to create transactional email, to do anything else that I want to do with it, because it's all available there on the profile. and I can tell whether or not what I'm doing is succeeding. So that's by way of being it. That's my whole demo.
Whoa. Okay. All right. I think we have 2 questions in the chat. One of them is my fault. Why doesn't Kale use dark mode? But I think the real question is, if you could request anything from the personalized team, what would that be and why, based on your experience?
Oh, wow. Like we're only just getting into to personalize. I know it's a pretty new product. I think I would suggest, what would I request? I think one thing that would help things get moving quicker is maybe a little bit more of a detailed success message when I've been loading put events. So one thing I struggled with briefly was just knowing whether my put events calls had succeeded or not. And because I asked this question because, like, as I've sort of said, I'm not a real developer, and I am constantly waiting for myself to screw up. So I always like to see detailed success messages that tell me that I have done the right thing. It's always good to, like, the lack of errors is good too. But for me, I like to see that I haven't messed it up. I think that's something. And as for dark mode, I do sometimes use dark mode, but I like looking at a white screen. I find it easier on my eyes than dark mode most of the time. Sometimes I switch in the evening, but I'm sorry if I've offended the sensibilities of somebody.
No.
I also don't have a very imaginative highlight scheme, just greens and reds and blues. I could definitely be having some better colors in here, and I will. If you have me on again, I'm gonna cook up something better.
Totally want to have you on again. I feel like my mind is blown. I didn't know, foolishly, but I did not know MarTech was this advanced. First of all, I didn't know MarTech was a thing. I just didn't know there was a community. It was but I didn't know it was this advanced.
There's many of us.
Yeah.
You gotta. I would another day. We'll show you the slide that us and many other MarTech companies use that show, like, logos of 5,000 different companies that are in the space now.
Yeah.
There are a lot of us. It's a big space.
It's crazy. Every time I've gotten, like, marketing related emails, I just think there's, like, a team of folks working behind the scenes to get me to click buy, like, add to cart on a product. But no, apparently it's just mParticle behind the scenes doing all the heavy lifting. It's pretty cool.
We're definitely one of them. I think there's a lot of us, and there's a lot that's really complicated. I think, again, for us, the piece that I'm excited about that is I think that a lot of people want to do something like machine learning, but they just never really get off the ground because it seems too hard. And I think, like, AWS has solved a big piece of that with personalize, and mParticle solves another piece of it by really making the pipes easy to set up and making everything easy to act on. With that, this doesn't need to be a whole big thing. It's something that you can just start trying tomorrow if you want.
And just, like, by way of your demo, just the user experience and interface is very accessible to whether you're a program manager or developer. Just the range, it definitely makes it accessible for everyone on your team.
I think, and that's time spent in the AWS docs is always well spent. I think the thing for someone like me, who, again, is fake, coming in from the outside, doesn't really know what they're doing, like the concept of permissions, and resource numbers and things like that took me a little while to understand. I think partly because I build so many fake things, and AWS is really set up to, like, make safe production scale apps work really well. So there's a few extra steps in there that I usually skip around security and permissions and stuff like that. So I usually have to remind myself to not be lazy. And again, like, in a production use case, that's good, right? There's a lot of things that you don't have to worry about because AWS sort of forces you to think every time you create a set of credentials, like, exactly what can this set of credentials do? And it's easy to not give things more permission than they need. You have to share some credentials with mParticle, but it's easy to lock us down to just being able to write to that Kinesis stream, right? Like, everything it's easy to make things safe. And I certainly feel very confident using them because I know that like security is a big concern for you guys, and I'm not going to try and solve that problem myself.
Yeah. Very cool. I'm learned a ton. So I think,
Me
there
too.
any like, is there any,
Yeah.
right? Is there any like parting wisdom? And also I think Ghost Host had a comment, which is like, what is a real developer? I think just looking at the code that you wrote, I feel like you're a real developer. But anyway,
I can tell you my definition for a real developer is somebody that can really make something from scratch. I can go and grab something that already exists and I can figure it out and change it around a bit. But if I'm starting from a blank piece of paper, I struggle a bit. And also I think fake developers love stuff like AWS because it means I don't really have to understand first in, first out, or exactly once delivery and distributed systems, and there's a lot of things that are kind of done for me. So that's kind of why I say I'm not real, but real enough for this. As you can see, even I can do it.
Yeah. Cool. Any parting wisdom before we sign off?
I guess my part is just try this out. I was amazed at how easy it was to set it up. Unfortunately, Items for You is not a real store, so I can never know. I can never know how effective this would really be. But I think the amount of investment is probably smaller than you think, particularly if you haven't looked at the space in a while. I think I would say to anybody who's kind of gone and tried to look this up before and seen a huge, big, pages and pages of Python, and what are those things with lots of arrows on them, and just thought, no, I'm too stupid for this. I'm never going to be able to understand. If you're one of these people, come back and give it another go. You'd be surprised what you can get done.
Yeah.
Also use mParticle.
Yeah, demo.mparticle.com, right? Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, you should definitely check that out.
Okay,
yep.
So we usually sign off one of three ways. We have our giddy up, our y'all come back now, and our happy trails. This time I'm glad I didn't forget. But yeah, go ahead and pick one, and then we'll sign off.
I'm a happy trails guy, so I'm going to say happy trails to you both, to the internet, to Marie, to Mo, to our Ghost Hosts. Happy trails.
What about you, Marie?
Right. I'm going to go with y'all come back now. I'm not in Texas, but I work with a lot of people in Texas, and I appreciate the use of y'all. And I will add another sign off if I'm allowed to add a fourth one, but just eat your cereal. I think if there's one added addition to what we've learned today, eat your cereal. Tricks are not only for kids, everyone.
I agree.
What about you, Mo?
Y'all come back now from me as well. We'll see you next Monday. I think we have NLX coming. And yeah, thanks for joining, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Awesome. Bye. Thanks, Kale.
Bye.